It's recently come to my attention that in War Thunder community, people started complaining about unrealistic behavior of long-rod penetrators, also known as APFSDS, and how they should shatter on specific angles. Specifically, most attention seems to be focused on Abrams tanks, where the main point being brought up is how the angle of the upper front plate is designed specifically to shatter APFSDS. Even more so, some even claim APFSDS can't even ricochet to begin with, and that they would shatter instead of ricocheting. While some might want to believe that Abrams' upper front plate will shatter any projectile that comes in contact with it, reality is far more disappointing. First of all, you might probably say Abrams' upper front plate was specifically designed for that, to shatter or deform incoming penetrators. And I would say you are very likely correct. But when this armor was designed, it was meant to protect against Soviet steel penetrators that would or would not have a small tungsten core at the tip of the projectile. This was very likely to shatter or deform since the material is much softer than what later projectiles adopted. Mainly, we are comparing sheet-grade steel to tungsten-heavy alloy, tungsten carbide, or depleted uranium. You might also say Russian tanks also have weak spots, why don't you mention them? And all I have to say is, this video is not about them. I am well aware they have problems. This video is about APFSDS shattering on upper front plate of Abrams. But what is shattering anyway? It seems to me people are led to believe that APFSDS shattering results in complete disintegration of the projectile, in bunch of tiny bits. I mean, glass shatters like that, right? Well, the problem with APFSDS shattering is that it usually shatters on one part, where the other part usually breaks off, and since it lost all the initial momentum, it can behave like a less powerful projectile, and those leftovers can still do a lot of damage. In the case of Abrams, they can continue riding the upper plate and strike the turret ring, ultimately jamming it. But that is more likely to occur with longer projectiles. Old Soviet steel projectiles might not have enough energy left to achieve anything, so against them it probably was useful. But now we come to tungsten. There have been lab tests done to test the behavior of WHA's, or tungsten heavy alloys, behavior on oblique angles. The penetrator had a length to diameter ratio of 10.7, which is even short for modern standards, since those tests are almost 2 decades old. The target plate was of the similar thickness as the diameter of the projectile, and it was made out of class 4 rolled homogeneous steel, which is apparently similar to what Abrams might be using. It was concluded that the velocity had a massive impact on the angle where a critical ricochet would occur. That is a ricochet, by the way, not shattering. Shattering might occur at even lower angles. But anyway, here is a quote from the document. It is noticed in figure 9 that the critical ricochet angle falls with increasing impact velocities. In other words, at a low target oblique angle, the ricochet can be achieved up to a relatively high impact velocities, though the penetration capability in flight direction is high at such velocities. i.e., ricochet is easily achieved with a low oblique angle. On the other hand, when the target oblique angle is high, the ricochet is possible only up to a limited impact velocity, beyond which full penetration, perforation, occurs. This basically means that the complete penetration will occur until a critical angle is achieved. Once it reaches a critical point, it will start bouncing off. On this chart, the white square marks where the projectile achieved perforation on the plate, and the black one where the projectile ricocheted. As you can see, at a velocity of 1500 meters per second, the critical ricochet angle is at 5 degrees, while at around 6 degrees there was a complete perforation on the plate. There are even images of the tests in the document. This is how the targets were set up. One very sloped plate and 3 thick witness blocks at the end. The witness blocks are each 38mm thick. The target is 6.25mm thick. The projectile is 75mm long and has a diameter of 7mm. As you can see on the 5-degree impact results, the projectile ricocheted off the plate and managed to penetrate the first witness block completely and got stopped somewhere midway through the second one. This not only means that the APFSDS can ricochet, but it also means that they can retain a big portion of their penetration. For a 75mm long projectile to penetrate over 40mm of armor after bouncing off is very good. Now, we have trial results of the 6 degrees target. The projectile appears to have broken off at some point, but the complete penetration of the plate did occur, which can be seen on the damage done to the weakness block. This might not seem like a lot of damage, but it doesn't matter. In the case of Abrams, or some lightly armored vehicles that focus on stopped armor, this is bad because all the fragments from the penetration would enter the vehicle. Now, here is the biggest issue. The higher the velocity, the lower the angle required for APFSDS to ricochet or break. Most of the modern projectiles have much higher velocities and would be striking the target at 1600 to 1700 meters per second, which would mean that the critical angle would be even lower than 5 degrees. Now, what does all of this mean for Abrams? Well, Abrams has a 38mm thick plate angled 7 to 8 degrees from the horizontal, which is well beyond the critical ricochet angle, not to mention the shattering angle for tungsten penetrators. If any tungsten or DU penetrator with high velocity and even semi-decent length to diameter ratio hits that plate, it would most likely go through. Even if a projectile strikes the plate at more oblique angles, the projectile is very likely to ricochet off the plate into the very much exposed turret ring, which is another issue. There might have been some changes to the upper plate where the material might have been changed to a steel of higher hardness, which would slightly increase the protection, but even that wouldn't improve a whole lot on the situation. The way to fix the plate is to up-armor it with add-on armor, like Germany is doing with Leopard 2A7 and what Sweden has done from the start with their STRE 122s. On Swedish trials it was concluded that the add-on armor on the upper plate would boost the protection greatly. And we know it's possible on Abrams because Iranian Zulfikar 3, which is a knockoff Abrams pretty much, with very comparable armor design, has some form of add-on on the upper plate. So why doesn't US do that? Well, what I think is the case is they don't really need nor want to. With the recent installation of Trophy active protection system, they made sure that heat munitions are no longer a threat for the tank. Facing off a tank in modern warfare which would actually shoot you with a modern projectile is very unlikely, and even to hit Abrams there is also hard to achieve in real warfare. It's possible, but not very likely to happen. So when you take into consideration that the thing that can achieve penetration is extremely unlikely to face Abrams in modern era, it's also very unlikely that it will get hit there. So taking all of that into consideration, the chances of Abrams getting hit there by a powerful APFSDS in real life are close to zero. Not to mention that the engineers are actively trying to reduce the tank's weight because of the bridge crossing and transportation issues, so adding a bunch of add-on armor would be counterproductive. There is a reason why turret has always been better protected than Abrams and the hull, because based on the combat experience, turret is far more likely to get hit than the hull, so they are improving the protection where it matters the most. Now, War Thunder is not real life, it's a video game, and of course it's a game where tanks fight tanks, and the battles usually occur on much closer ranges than they would in real life. So people find themselves getting penetrated there more than they'd like to, so they thought it would make a difference if they started complaining about that. But I'm sorry guys, APFSDS certainly can ricochet, and even so it takes very steep angles to start affecting the incoming projectile. The upper front plate of Abrams tanks is just not steep or strong enough to counter modern penetrators, which would most likely just go through it. There are a lot of pictures online of tanks being penetrated on very steep angles by some APFSDS projectiles. And also, not to mention that Abrams getting hit on the upper plate directly from the front is extremely unlikely to happen. Tanks don't fight in a flat area. A hit might come from above or below, so that might increase or decrease its effectiveness. And don't be fooled, APFSDS penetrators have very minimal shift in drop angle. It would most likely not even reach 1 degree on standard combat distances. And seriously guys, I'm having a blast with Abrams in War Thunder, even more so after they gave it MA29A1. It's my second favorite tank in the game, after Leopard 2A6 of course. That thing is completely broken. And the point of this video is not that War Thunder is realistic, it's far from it, but the point is to clear up any doubts about the performance of APFSDS on steep angles. Of course, the tests I showed in this video may not be 100% proof evidence of the behavior of such armor, and we might only know if someone shoots an Abrams tank with a modern APFSDS projectile, but they give us a good idea on how projectiles might behave in such scenarios. That would be all, thanks for watching. If you like my content, you can consider supporting me on Patreon, and if you can't, leave a like on the video or subscribe to the channel if you're new. And I'll see you all in the next video. Have a nice day.